Good morning. Today we begin the book of Exodus. It's the story of Moses, mostly of the Israelites. And it begins with them in Egypt. Joseph has just died, and his brothers have all died, and and there's a new king that rises in Egypt who did not know Joseph. It says in verse 8 of chapter 1. And he looked and he said to his people, look, these Israelites are becoming so many, they could easily revolt and overpower us. We need to deal shrewdly with them. And because in the event of war, they will join with their enemies and fight against us and escape. So this new king didn't trust these Israelites. And then it tells us in verse 15 that the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, to take any of the Hebrew male children and make sure that they died in childbirth, because he was trying to do anything and everything he could to control the population of these miserable Israelites, these untrustworthy ones. But verse 17 says the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded. So the Israelites continued to thrive, and the midwives, told the king, well, the Hebrew women are so strong, they have delivered their babies before we get there, so we don't have any choice. It was it was a little bit of a lie. I'm pretty sure that they told the king. And then in the end of chapter 1, verse 22, Pharaoh commands all of his people, every Hebrew boy that is born shall be thrown into the Nile River. I mean, what a horrible thing to think about. And then chapter 2, there was a man from the house of Levi, married a Levite woman, and the woman conceived and bore a son. This is Moses' mother. And she hides this little baby for 3 months until she can't hide him any longer, and then she makes this papyrus basket. We know this story. Hides him in the Nile River and has his older sister watching to see what happens. And Pharaoh's daughter comes to bathe, it says, in the river, and her attendants walked beside the river, and she saw this basket with this infant in there and drew it out. And she drew it out, and she says when she opened it, she saw the child, and he was crying. She took pity on him. And she said, this must be one of the Hebrew children. Pretty obvious observation in so many ways, and right at that point in time, Moses' sister shows up. Would you like me to find a Hebrew nurse for her? Someone that would take care of this child for you? And of course, Pharaoh's daughter says yes. And so she returns the child to the mother, and the mother raises the child. In verse 10, when the child grew up, the mother brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. She took him as her son, and she named him Moses, because I drew him out of the water. And verse 11, now Moses is grown. It doesn't tell us exactly how old he is, but he's grown up, and he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he kills that Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. The next day he sees 2 Hebrews fighting, and he goes to try to break the fight up to reason with them, and they say, what are you going to do? Kill us too, just like you killed him? And so Moses is afraid of what might happen. And then it tells us that Pharaoh, in verse 15, Pharaoh hears of it, and he sought to kill Moses. So Moses flees, and he goes and he settles in this land of Midian, and he goes there, and there's 7 sisters come to water their sheep, but others won't let them do that. And Moses comes to their defense, and when they return to their father, his name is Reuel, R-E-U-E-L, and he wonders, why are you back so soon today? And they tell him the story of how Moses watered their sheep. And he says, well, go, get him to come. And in time, Moses stays with this family, and he marries the daughter Zipporah, and they have a child together. And verse 23 now, we made a little switch again. After a long time, the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. And here God looks upon the Israelites. He remembers his promise to Abraham and to Isaac and to their forefathers. And in chapter 2 ends with God remembering his promise. Chapter 3 begins with the call of Moses. Moses is keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. And he looks, and the angel of the Lord is there. The angel of the Lord appears in this burning bush. This bush is on fire, but yet it doesn't burn up. So Moses approaches and hears a voice. Take your sandals off. This is holy ground. And God speaks to him. I am the God of your father, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Rightly so. And then God continues on with Moses. He says, I have heard the cry of my people in Egypt. They are oppressed and slaves. And Moses said, hey, if I go to them, they're going to wonder, well, who in the world has sent you? Moses doesn't want to go. I mean, why would you? I mean, it's a horrible task. And he says, well, who should I say sent me? And this is where God said, I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent you. And I like that. I am. Not will, not I was, I am, I will be, but I am. I exist. And God can say that any and every day. I am, because God is forever, eternal. God tells him what to do. Assemble the elders. And Moses, in chapter 4, then Moses says, but suppose they don't want to believe me or listen to me. But say, you just are telling us, you're making up a story. So God tells him, throw your staff on the ground, becomes a snake, grab the tail, it becomes a rod again. Put your hand inside your cloak, pull it out, it's leprous, put it back in, pull it out, it's healed. And then the third sign is you'll take some water, pour it on the ground, and it will become blood. If they don't believe those signs, then there's something wrong with them. And then verse 10 of chapter 4. Oh, my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither have I ever been able to speak. I'm slow of speech. And so this is where, some people say, well, Moses stuttered or he had a speech impediment. I think the reality is that he just, he was afraid to do it. He didn't want to do it. And speaking in front of people is one of the hardest things to do. It is basically the most feared thing for people to do. And the Lord asks him, who gives speech to mortals? Who does all this? And Moses in verse 13 says, oh, my Lord, please send somebody else. Let somebody else do this, And I can understand that. Let somebody else do this. But the Lord says to Moses, when you go to Egypt, perform these miracles in front of Pharaoh, but I will harden his heart, so he will not let the people go. So Moses and Aaron go. So, God says, well, I'm going to send your brother Aaron with you because he can speak. So Aaron and Moses go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. And Pharaoh doesn't listen. He makes their work harder. He quits supplying the straw for them to make the bricks. They now have to get their own straw. So the people are more oppressed than anything. And they began then to grumble against Moses and Aaron. Look what you've done. You come to save us and you've made our work harder. You're not doing what you promised. But God promises with a mighty hand to lead them out. And in verse 7 of chapter 6, God says, I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am the Lord your God, who has freed you from the burden of the Egyptians. And then we go through and, God says to Moses, go tell Pharaoh again, let my people go. And because I'm kind of rushing through this part of the story, but we get the names of the men and women and sons and daughters, and a lot of the lineage there, and then Moses and Aaron again go to Pharaoh, and God says, go tell Pharaoh that I am speaking to you. But Moses said to the Lord, I am a poor speaker. Why would Pharaoh listen to me? And that's the way chapter 6 ends. You know, and we all know what happens, and we will look at that in the days ahead to remind ourselves of this journey that God leads the Israelites on, and some of the, I mean, all of the plagues that come. But it's because of God's promise. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. God is serious about taking us as his people, never letting us go.